Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leo Sukiyo. In this video, I'm going to discuss what I believe to be the core elements necessary to excel in League of Legends. Now, there are many aspects of the game that you have to master in terms of getting good, so to speak, but I think that when you look at all these individual facets of the game, that it can be brought down to three simple words, three key principles that stem from game knowledge or start at that point. They're rooted there. But the three key principles are efficiency, consistency, and adaptation. And the reason why I lump this all together is because you could pick anything, whether it be CSing, positioning, you could imagine even team fighting, rotations, objective priority. You can lump it into these three core elements. So just to start it all off, I'm going to kind of define these terms so everybody has a better understanding of what I'm getting at. So we'll look at efficiency to begin, as I think it's the ability to optimally perform when it comes to the fundamentals, core functions, and also strategic aspects of the game. So you might think of it as the differences between CSing across all ranked tiers. So you would expect less CS from a silver player by 10 minutes than you would a diamond player at 10 minutes. You would probably assume maybe in silver, I don't know, maybe about 50 or 60, in diamond at least about maybe 70, 80. And obviously that means a difference because across the span of time in the game, you're getting more gold. That's a huge difference. That increases your relevance over time, makes you hit power spikes a lot sooner than you normally would. So the efficiency is definitely the core component here. The more efficient you are, the better you are at these core elements. So you can even look at pro play. You look at someone like Deft, and notably I've been watching a lot of KT, a lot of SKT, a lot of Samsung Galaxy, and when you see Deft go up against a lot of other ADCs, it's not unnatural for him to accrue a lead where he shouldn't and stay even where he should outright have a mismatch or an unfavorable matchup. So CS is just the easiest example. You could look at other aspects in terms of efficiency, like for instance, if you want to look at a more broad sense, a team's efficiency in pro play to do rotations. In other words, if the jungler comes, ganks for his bottom lane, they get a double kill, they can then decide, hey, you know what, let's get the first turret gold. Or maybe they don't have enough time to do that. Maybe they don't have enough damage to that. Maybe there's a Jhin in their bottom lane, and therefore they can't auto-attack it quickly enough, as opposed to like a Caitlyn or an Ezreal, and therefore they decide, hey, you know what, let's rotate over and get this dragon, which is even more likely if it's an Infernal or a Mountain Drake. And then maybe they could decide, you know, let's push up the wave into tower first, then take the Drake, then back, then come back, maximize our gold efficiency, you know, buy whatever items we need. So how efficient people are in their actions is really important. So let's think about another example here. How about, yeah, okay, we got that. Warding would be a prime aspect. So you could think, I think back to a infographic I saw on Reddit. It was a little while ago, notably. I haven't seen it in a while, so while I can't pinpoint exact numbers, the general trend was how people ward in each tier in ranked. And bronze warded a little bit, silver a little bit more. There was a general upward trajectory till somewhere in diamond, and then it started to decrease a little bit in like diamond 1, master, challenger, and we could attribute this to warding efficiency. You don't need to buy as many wards as other people might if you know where to place them, if you're using them proactively to spout out the enemy jungler and then respecting their position, or spout out any enemies in the mid to late game. Simultaneously, you'd be able to use a minimal amount of wards in maximized circumstances, optimal circumstances, so you wouldn't waste your trinket until about the 245 mark if you're bot lane or top lane, depending where the enemy jungler started, because you know you can't possibly be ganked until that time frame, until about the 3-minute mark. So you ward a little bit early so you're not in the threat of danger, but then you can spot out the enemy jungler if he comes roaming downward. So it's a matter of efficiency. There's a little less wards in the highest tiers because of the fact that they use their vision to the utmost potential. If you think of efficiency, some core examples in terms of pro play would be like SK Telecom. I'm not just diving into games where they have clear advantages and maintain equivalent gold, but in games where they should fall behind and they manage to keep even, or in games where they fall behind and they just outright style on their opponents in a team fight. And we've seen this happen a few times, like Ezreal's efficiency on a champion, SKT Bang's efficiency on a champion like Ezreal. is superb, and we've seen him carry fights for SKT on that champion before. We've seen SKT just win games outright through team fighting before. That's because they have immense efficiency in how they coordinate, as opposed to other teams who might be efficient but not quite as efficient as SKT. And another factor right now, moving on to consistency, is how frequently one can efficiently perform when it comes to these aspects of the game. So in other words, being efficient isn't enough, because even if you could achieve in one game, say the 80 CS per 10, but you can't do it the next three, then it doesn't matter how efficient you are if you're not consistently doing so. The consistency shows a certain level of mastery because you've practiced enough in order to have these things integrated into your skill set. You'll be able to execute them at any point in time that you wish. So from personal observations, I've spent a lot of time in the amateur scene as a coach and analyst. I've seen many different players, usually around like Plat 2, maybe all the way up to Diamond 1, a few master tier players, but I haven't admittedly analyzed them too close because usually they're on a league of their own, and they outright just outperform most of the other players around them. But I've had the rare opportunity. I've been exposed to these unique individuals. They have different philosophies, different approaches. One thing rings true: the difference between those in the high diamond master tier element and those in the low diamond would be player consistency. So their ability to consistently perform across all metrics in the game. And like I said, CSing is an easy example, but it could be positioning, you can think jungle pathing, it can even come down to just itemization and how you adapt to that, how you spend your gold wisely. Maybe if you're forced to back a little earlier than normal, the difference between picking up an efficient item or settling for something else. Sometimes you're forced to, but there's always some option. And there are players who just seem to naturally understand, or they just study hardcore and understand exactly what would benefit them the most at that time. For instance, I don't know, say you're in scratch that actually. Never mind that. But to go on to jungle pathing actually being another example, to execute regularly from game to game obviously is just the core and fundamental thing, because efficiency without consistency is absolutely meaningless. It means that you're not going to be able to continuously rise, and to improve you want consistency. You obviously want efficiency, so you study the people who already excel at the game, certainly, but you have to emulate and innovate at the same time. So when you think consistency, we can go to this recent interview with Sven from G2, and it was by Blitz Esports, I believe, and he gives this speech about how he used to look up to Reckless, because Reckless, in Sven's words, would basically go even or be a consistent rock for the team, or he would win some games for them. So while he wasn't always a carry, he could carry. And even when he wasn't a carry, he was not a liability. But he was always a consistent factor. And despite this, it was up until he developed a style of his own that he felt like he was the better player, that his style was superior in some sense, because he could consistently carry a lot more than Reckless does for his teams. Which is not to knock Reckless's stats this season. He's actually been a very good AD carry stat-wise, but you will find more memorable plays from Sven than you will from Reckless. And why? Because Sven can consistently create these outplays. He can regularly perform them. Another thing I would immediately call to mind, like I brought up before, is Bang's Ezreal, which has the able to single-handedly carry a team fight. And we've seen this before, as long as people are meat shields, as long as you have the tank top or maybe a tank in the jungle, depending on when the meta fits it. If you have somebody to guarantee he could output damage safely, Bang will carry a game. You also think of consistency, I think of Samsung Galaxy Crown's Victor. It is so potent and so consistent in its carry performances that this man gets Victor banned against him in metas where Victor isn't even meta. He's not even a first tier pick, and he'll get it banned against him. Nobody wants to give him that champion. His influence is too high because his consistency in his performance, whether it be CS, positioning, his team fighting, understanding how to use his abilities and choke points, or even be able to, Victor laser a Lucian that dashes into him. Nice meme. He's just really good at the champion, so no one wants to deal with that. They'd rather eliminate it than deal with it. And that's the importance of consistency and efficiency together. That's what makes you memorable, legendary, and just a core figure that everyone will revere in some regard or aspect. The last element, we have the first two, efficiency, consistency, and the last one is adaptation. Now, adaptation is tricky because it encompasses a few metrics. It's not only, a reflexive mechanical ability, but also your ability to critically think. And depending on the circumstances, it can be either or. So, for instance, um, think of it this way: if you're in a lane and the enemy jungler comes at a time where it's unexpected, you might think to yourself, well, now it's upon my positioning, my mechanical prowess. What summoner spells do I have? What's my kit, depending on the champion I am? How do I outplay this? Can I get the double kill? Do I need to just escape? Is the damage threat outright just that high? Can I do nothing about this? You're adapting to these circumstances, and it doesn't matter whether you get the outplay or you just get out safely. You're adapting to these unforeseen circumstances the best way that you know how. And the people who can respond to these circumstances, whether it be fleeing or outplaying, those are the people who will garner the most pressure on the map, who will survive, who will be able to do more for their team, because you're not dying, you're not becoming a liability. Sure, you might lose a summoner, but you're not dead, which means you have to play a little safer and adapt to this circumstance. But if you're able to adapt successfully, there's less liability there. You're less likely to be a null factor or an outright hindrance to your team. So when considering these things, it's important. The more critical thinking aspect, or an example of that, would be: imagine you're a jungler and you fall victim to an early invade, or later on in the game you see the enemy jungler invading the quadrant you're not in. You would have to consider a multitude of options. You have to critically think, well, what path do you take now? Do you go into their red side because they went into your red side? Do your laners even have pressure to allow you to do that? Could you just gank someone and gain an advantage while they're counter jungling you? This way, perhaps you could pressure an alternative lane on the opposite side of the map if you pull off the gank successfully, if you have the CC and the damage to do so. There are many options, but obviously you need to figure that out. Look at the mini-map, look at the position of your allies, what champions are they playing, what is available to you, and what can you do individually. So these are just important things. So I think of one shining example, pardon, one shining example from spring of 2017 across all regions would be the junglers opting in for this Raptor camp start. Because if you take the mini Raptors, then you immediately get the level 2, so when you're taking the big one, it's easier. You have 2 skills available. Then you can go to red and you have 2 skills. Meanwhile, you're already a bit of experience into level 2. It just makes things a lot more efficient. You get the level quicker, you get quite a bit of gold, admittedly. And it was an early game adaptation to allow quicker jungle pathing. You'd be able to get to a lane and gank a little more efficiently, get around the map a little bit. It opens up more diverse strategies in terms of how you would want to path. And that's an adaptation. That's another critical thinking adaptation right there. So the last key portion would depend on how static or flexible a player is generally, because in different games, and this is the larger aspect of adaptation. It's not only the in-game reflexes or the in-game critical thinking, but it's also the ability to adapt game to game. So when you're going game to game, you have to imagine, even if you're playing against the same champion 2 games in a row, it might be a different player. They might have a different style. The last victor you faced might just E the wave AFK farm. This one might just harass you with it and farm with Q, or Q a minion, get the shield, harass you, take the trade, win the trade. People might be aggro, people might be passive, their end game objectives may be different, hence their play styles may be different. Likewise, there are a multitude of champions in League of Legends. You might have just faced a Victor and styled on him as X champion, but when you go into the next game as X champion, since you're facing a Katarina, it's a different beast and you don't know how to proceed, which is the importance of adapting game to game and understanding these matchups. And again, these core principles stem from game knowledge. It's easy for you to become consistent and efficient at things like CSing and trading the more you know your champion, his kits, his power spike, his or her power spikes, etc., and the champions you're up against. Likewise, it's easier to adapt if you understand these same things. What are they looking to do on this champion? You know it. Well, what do you want to do on your champion? So you got to wait to bait out whatever their skill is to engage, hope that they miss it, or just outright dodge it. Then you could trade a little more freely, knowing they don't have an engage tool. These are just hypotheticals, things off the top of the head, but definitely need to be considered. So before we move on, where we can see how these things link together, you have to be efficient at the game. Efficiency is only as important as you are consistent with that efficiency, and adaptation is the final thing that links it all together and makes you kind of this complete player, because if you're able to efficiently perform something and do so consistently, then you'll excel, you'll maximize gold efficiency, maintain relevance, perhaps acquire relevance easier, hit your power spikes sooner, and then you're able to influence the map. And if you could adapt from game to game, in-game circumstance to in-game circumstance, you minimize the possibility of you dying, of you getting caught out, of the enemy sneaking up on you, if you're obviously warding efficiently, consistently in the appropriate places at the appropriate times. So applying these key principles is just essential. There's no other word. There's no other way to put it. And for me, you just have to understand, CSing is the easy example, but like it could get as intricate as even comboing with the champion you have. Riven players who are obviously the best at the champion, you'd have to consider they combo most efficiently. They get the auto attack resets, they get the stun, they dash out, they wait for the dash to come back up, and then try to trade again, because every time they dash in, they get the shield, and then they can trade a little more efficiently, take a little less damage, and the mobility of the kit allows them to do so. So you'll see the most adept Riven players taking the best trades, perhaps even winning matchups that they should not. And these are the people that we type of admire. On a larger scale, if you look at a team, CC layering is amongst one of those aspects that needs to be done efficiently, consistently, and then obviously you need to adapt to a circumstance. In other words, what do you want to do with a Nautilus ultimate, a Lissandra ultimate? You chain them. If you're firing off a Nautilus ultimate and then Lissandra ults that person, what happens to your Nautilus ultimate? I actually don't know if it goes on cooldown or not, but the point is that that's wasted time. It's inefficiency, and that's a problem. The teams that obviously do this the best will have more successful team fights, or more successful picks generally, depending on the champion. You might think of like Malzahar and Ashe, that would be more of a pick comp. So yes, it gets into even the macro and micro aspects of the game. These three principles apply to virtually anything. You can pick any aspect of the game and then just apply these three principles, and that's what matters, is your ability to efficiently do it, consistently do it, and then adapt in differing circumstances. So at the core of these principles are a few things. Game knowledge and player mentality are probably the two biggest things, because the more you know about the game, the better you can be efficient and consistent and adapt, because then you know what's going to happen in the varying circumstances. You also know what you should be able to do if you're efficient at your champion, at your fundamentals, and perform them consistently. Despite being in oppressive matchups, you know what you can do. So ultimately, you can naturally study people who excel at the game, as I said before. You watch via stream, or you can look up guides that they might create and have somewhere on the internet. Ultimately, you can emulate until you develop your own style, as I was mentioning before. So improvement depends upon, obviously, initiative and the player's willingness to learn, as well as relearn as you go along, because there are things that you'll learn initially that'll help you for maybe a short time, but as you'll find as you go on, they might not be optimal to carry you throughout the higher tiers of play. You might need to actually buckle down and increase your ability on certain micro aspects of your gameplay, even if it is just minor tweaks to positioning, which could mean the world later on, especially on a mobile champions, whenever they are in meta, or even if those are your flavor of the season. So being receptive to criticism, to be able to dig into it and then just kind of take whatever's of worth out. This goes along with player mentality. You need to have a good mentality, good game knowledge, and then you're able to kind of maximize your efficiency, your consistency, and your ability to adapt across the board. And I don't know how many times I could say those three words, but hopefully, if nothing more, you take that away from this, because that's how you grow in the game. That's how you promote your growth, and that's how you master your champions and fundamentals, and that's how you will climb up the ladder. If you don't focus on the win, but you focus on the improvement, and like I said, the efficiency, consistency, and adaptation, then you will excel at League of Legends, and I guarantee that you will see measured increases in your performance across the board. So don't stunt your own growth, exercise the key principles, and get better, get good. But that's about it. I had nothing more to say about these key principles. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this has been helpful for you in terms of just general game philosophy or core principles to focus on when you're looking at aspects of the game to improve upon. And you can let me know what you think in the comments below.